It was the 11th of October, a Tuesday, and my wife walked to our front door at 11,040 at night wearing a cologne I had never owned. I didn't raise my voice. I slid her coat off her shoulders the same way I had 1,000 times before, and my thumb found something stiff in the left pocket. Guard. Folded twice. 4 words on it, and a date. March 14. Tell him or I will. I price things for a living. Hand me a set of drawings for a building that doesn't exist yet, and I'll tell you what it cost down to the last box of screws. It took me 19 years to start pricing my own marriage. But standing in my own hallway that night, breathing another man's cologne in a house I had paid for, I only had one question. Tell me what? My name is Curtis. I was 46 years old that October, senior estimator at Brantley Muir Construction, and I had been married to Nadine for 19 years. We lived on Aldermill Road in a 2-story colonial with a crooked porch step I fixed 4 separate times because she liked the sound it made when the mail carrier came up. Our daughter Callie was 20, 2 hours away at school, studying something with the word statistics in it that I pretended to follow every single time she explained it to me. I had a routine, and I loved it. Thursday nights we ate at a steakhouse called Rowan's over on Delmar Street. Corner booth. Same waitress for 6 years. I ordered the same ribeye every time, medium, so I could spend the whole 10 minutes watching Nadine make up her mind. I kept every receipt from those dinners. All of them in a shoebox on the closet shelf. 19 years of paper going soft at the folds. I never told anybody that, because there's no good way to say out loud that you're saving proof of a life you're quietly afraid of losing. And here's the thing about a man like me. I don't argue. I count. When I'm on a call with a general contractor and I give him a number, I count the seconds of silence that come back at me. 4 seconds means he thinks I'm too high. 2 seconds means I left money on the table on my own bid. Silence is data, if you've learned how to read it. For 19 years, I figured love ran on the same math, put enough in, and the number comes back right. So I put in. I took the night bids nobody else wanted so I could buy her the wool coat she'd looked at twice in a catalog and then pretended she hadn't. I planned the dates. I booked the trips. I knew her sister Roz's birthday better than my own. And somewhere in the last 2 years, the number stopped coming back. It started so small, I couldn't have proved it to a living soul. She stopped finishing her sentences with me. She'd laugh at something on her phone, and when I asked, she'd say, "Nothing you'd get." I started sleeping on the far edge of a king bed like a man renting a room in his own house. Then one night in the kitchen, I came up behind her while she was loading the dishwasher and put my hand on her waist. She moved. Not fast. Just 1 step to the left, the way you step around a stranger in a grocery aisle. "Don't," she said. And then, quieter, like she was doing me a kindness, "Love isn't something you're owed, Curtis. It has to be earned." 19 years. 2 mortgages. 1 daughter. A shoebox full of receipts on a closet shelf. And love had to be earned. I counted the silence after she said it. 11 seconds. In 22 years of pricing work, I had never once gotten the number that high. Real quick, if this story's already got a hold of you, do me a favor and hit subscribe and give it a like. It helps more than you'd think. All right, back to that kitchen. I did what I always did, which was decide it was my fault and double down. I booked Charleston for our anniversary, an inn on a side street with a wrought iron balcony, $1180 non-refundable, because the refundable rooms didn't have the balcony and she loved a balcony. She looked at the confirmation on my phone for maybe 3 seconds. Then she said October was going to be brutal at work and handed the phone back without letting go of her coffee. Look, I know how this sounds. A grown man reading tea leaves in his own living room. But the signs weren't dramatic. They never are. They were small, and they were steady, and that's exactly why they work. Her phone started living face down on every surface in that house. She began taking calls out in the garage with the door shut, in November weather, with the light off. There was a new gym bag in the trunk of her car, and it never once came inside to be washed. Thursdays turned into book club, and in 4 months I never saw a book. Then, in September, I stopped at Rowan's alone to pick up an order. Deb was working the front, and she smiled at me the way she'd smiled at us for 6 years. Tell Nadine the new guy finally got the scallops right, she said. She said they were rubbery last time. I stood there holding a paper bag that was going warm against my chest. Nadine and I hadn't set foot in Rowan's together since the first week of July. She had been in. She'd been in recently enough to complain about the scallops. She just hadn't been in with me. Before I go on, if you'd been standing at that counter holding that bag, what would you have done right then? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. I'll tell you what I did. Nothing. I said thank you, I tipped $4, and I drove home the long way with the radio off. Because that's the part nobody tells you about a marriage going under. You don't fight it. You manage it. You tell yourself you're being patient when what you're really doing is being afraid. And then came the 11th of October. I'd waited up, rebuilt that porch step again that afternoon, third board from the top, because the frost was coming and I didn't want her stepping through it in the dark. I had the porch light on for her at 9, still on at 10, still on at 11,040. She came in fast, keys already in her hand, and the cologne came in with her. Sandalwood and something sharp underneath it, like cut cedar. It wasn't mine. I've owned 3 bottles of cologne in my adult life, and I could have named all 3 in my sleep. Long day? I asked. Brutal, she said, and she wouldn't look at the porch light. I counted. 6 seconds. And then something in me went very, very quiet. Not calm, quiet. The way a job site goes quiet right before somebody realizes the crane's been reading the wrong load chart all morning. You're right, by the way, I said. About love. That it has to be earned. She stopped on the second stair. What? You're right, I said. So I'm going to earn it. My way. She waited for me to explain it. I didn't. She went up, and the bedroom door shut, and I stood in the hall a long time with that folded card in my hand, reading 4 words I had no place in. Then I went into the office, opened my laptop, and did the one thing I am genuinely good at in this world. I started pricing my own life. Joint account. 14 months back. I wasn't looking for anything, honestly. I think I just wanted numbers in front of me because numbers have never once lied to me. There were 11 cash withdrawals I had never made. Odd amounts. 1,400. 2,600. 900. Spread out just far enough apart that nothing ever tripped a flag. $23,700 gone one careful bite at a time. The first one was dated November 3rd of the year before 4 full months before the date written on that card. And every single one of them had been pulled from a branch on Holloway Avenue, 16 miles east of my office, in the exact opposite direction of anywhere my wife had ever told me she was going. I sat with that address on the screen until the number stopped meaning anything, and then I did something that surprised me more than the money did. I closed the laptop. I didn't screenshot it, didn't print it, didn't go upstairs and shake her awake. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank the whole thing standing at the sink in the dark. Because here's what I understood in that moment, and I want to be honest about it. If I'd gone up those stairs that night, I'd have been doing the same thing I'd been doing for 2 years. Asking, begging her to explain me back into my own marriage. And I was done asking. The next morning, I got up at 10 minutes to 6. Not because I had a plan, because I couldn't stand lying there listening to her breathe. There's a gym out on Del Mar called the Iron Gate, one of those places with the rubber floors and the fluorescent hum, run by a guy who never asks you a single question. I paid for a year up front. $41 a month. I remember thinking that was the first money I'd spent on myself since the truck. I couldn't do a single pull-up that first morning. 46 years old, 6'1", 238 pounds, and I hung off that bar like a coat somebody forgot. A kid in a school hoodie waited behind me and pretended to stretch so I wouldn't feel it. I went back the next day anyway, and the day after that. I stopped eating lunch out of a vending machine at the trailer. Started cooking Sunday nights, chicken, rice, whatever was on sale, and packing it in the same 6 containers. I bought a proper pair of boots. Then a proper coat. Then, sometime in November, 2 shirts that actually fit the shoulders I'd been hiding under a size too big for 8 years. And I stopped chasing. That's the part that mattered. No more texting her at 2 p.m. to ask how her day was going. No more, what time do you think you'll be home? No more waiting up with the porch light on. When she took a call in the garage, I didn't stand near the door anymore. I turned the game on and let her go. The house got very quiet. And a quiet house, it turns out, is a thing a person can notice. 10 days in, she asked me who I'd been talking to on the phone. I said, work. That was true. I was on the phone with a steel supplier about a misshipment. 14 days in, she asked why I was up so early. I said, gym, also true. 19 days in, she stood in the bathroom doorway while I was shaving and said, in a voice I hadn't heard in a year and a half, "You're being weird lately." I counted the silence I let sit there before I answered. 9 seconds. I watched her get uncomfortable in every one of them. "I'm just earning it," I said. "Like you said." She left the doorway. And that night, for the first time in months, she came to bed before I did. Now, while all that was happening on the surface, I was doing something else underneath it. Something she never once thought to look for, because for 19 years she'd been married to a man she considered a very nice appliance. I built a spreadsheet. That's my whole life, if you want the truth of it. 22 years of taking a mess somebody hands me and turning it into a column of numbers that can't argue back. Nadine used to joke at parties that I could find $11 in a $40 million bid. She said it like it was charming. She never once considered that a man who can find $11 and $40 million can absolutely find $23,000 in his own house. So I pulled 14 months of statements into rows. Date, amount, location, and one column I labeled her account of that day, where she'd told me she was, what she'd said when she got home. 19 years of marriage will give you a surprisingly good memory for the small lies once you finally let yourself write them down. 3 things came out of that sheet, and each one was worse than the last. The first, the withdrawals weren't random. Every single one landed within 2 days of the 15th or the last day of a month. Somebody was making a payment. The second, they were growing. $900 a month at the start. $2,600 by August. That's not a woman treating herself. That's a woman falling behind on something. And the third one I almost missed, because it had been sitting in our statements for 2 years disguised as something boring. $1,150 automatic the first of every month to an outfit called MRC Holdings LLC. I had assumed for 2 years it was the umbrella insurance policy she'd set up after her father died. I'd never once opened a statement. die. She'd handled that. MRC Holdings wasn't an insurance company. It didn't have a website. It had a registered agent in a strip mall and a filing date from 3 years back. If you're still with me and this one's got you, a like and a subscribe would genuinely mean a lot to me. All right. Let's keep going. On a Saturday in early November, I drove out to Holloway Avenue. 16 miles, 40 minutes with the bridge traffic. I told myself I was going for the drive. It's nothing out there. A bank branch on the corner, a nail salon, a dentist with a hand-painted sign, and behind all of it, a self-storage place. 4 long rows of orange doors and a chain-link gate with a keypad. I sat in my truck in that lot for 26 minutes and I couldn't tell you what I was hoping to see. A car. A man. Something I could point at. Instead, a woman came out of the office with a clipboard, saw me sitting there, and waved like I was a customer. I waved back. Then I drove home and made dinner. Because I still didn't have anything. I had a card in a coat pocket, a column of numbers, and a smell. That's not proof. That's a man building a case against the person he still, God help me, loved. Meanwhile, at work, something started happening that I did not engineer and did not see coming. Marcus Muir called me into his office the week before Thanksgiving. Corbin Ridge, 140 units, mixed use, the biggest thing our shop had ever bid. He slid the drawings across the desk and said the client wanted someone who could sit in a room with them and hold the number without blinking. He said, "You look different lately, Curtis." He didn't mean the 22 pounds. He meant I'd stopped apologizing before I spoke. I took the job, And on that job, I was put across a conference table from a woman named Dana Whitfield, the developer's project lead, sharp, fast, laughed once every 2 hours and made it count. We worked 11-hour days on that bid for 3 weeks. Nothing happened. I want that on the record. Nothing ever happened. But on the second Thursday in December, there was a client dinner at Rowan's. Of all the restaurants in the city, Rowan's. And I was standing in the front hall laughing at something Dana said about a structural engineer with my hand on the back of a chair when the door opened behind me. Nadine was there to pick up an order. Alone. I said hello. I introduced them. I was polite and I was warm. And then I turned right back to the table because the client had a question about the podium slab. I never once looked to see if she was still standing there. I found out later that she was, for a full minute and a half, holding a paper bag, watching her husband be a man other people wanted to talk to. She was different that night. Softer. She asked about the bid. She asked what Dana's last name was, twice. And 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, the mail came, and in it was an envelope from a bank I don't use, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Curtis Vane, March 3rd notice. It was a statement for a home equity line of credit on the house on Aldermill Road. Opened 14 months earlier. Signed by both of us. I had never signed anything in my life for that bank, and the balance drawn against my house was $190,300. I read that number 4 times standing at the mailbox with the flag still up, and the cold coming through my shirt, and I swear to you the street noise just stopped. $190,300. Against a house that was 11 years from being paid off. A house with a crooked porch step I'd fixed 4 times. I went inside. Nadine was in the kitchen with the radio on, cutting a grapefruit into sections the way her mother used to, and she said good morning without turning around. Morning, I said. And I put that envelope in my coat, went out to the truck, and drove to a diner on Route 7 called the Bellwood, where I sat in a booth for 2 hours with a black coffee and read every line of that statement twice. Black coffee. No sugar, nothing in it. I've taken it that way since I was 19 because my first foreman told me a man who needs his coffee sweet has already started negotiating with himself before 8 in the morning. Silly thing. And stuck. The loan had been opened on August 9th of the previous year. 14 months. The signature on the disclosure page was mine. My C, my V, the little dead flat line I've made on the end of my last name since high school. Somebody had practiced it. Somebody had practiced it well, and somebody had practiced it for a while. And that's when the whole thing rearranged itself in front of me. Because the cash withdrawals, the $23,700 in careful bites from a branch 16 miles east, those weren't the theft. Those were somebody making the payments on the theft. She'd been draining our checking account to service a loan she'd taken out against our house without me. The betrayal wasn't the money. The money was the maintenance on the betrayal. Now, this is the part where most men do the obvious thing. Drive home. Put the paper on the table. Ask her what the hell she did. I didn't. And I want to tell you exactly why, because it wasn't strength. Not at first. It was that I already knew how that conversation would go. She would cry, and I would apologize for making her cry, and by Sunday afternoon, I'd be the one making it up to her. 19 years is a long time to teach somebody how to handle you. So, instead I did what I do. I opened a folder. I requested the full origination file from the lender, as a joint account holder, which, on paper, I was. I asked for the application, the disclosures, the appraisal order, and the funds disbursement instruction. That last one is the whole ballgame, and almost nobody knows to ask for it. It tells you where the money physically went the day it left the bank. They said 15 business days. I said fine. I'd waited 2 years already. And listen, if this story's pulling you along, take 1 second and hit subscribe and give it a like. Then let me get back to it. Meanwhile, I kept living. That's what she couldn't get her head around. I was down 31 pounds by Christmas. Corbin Ridge came in at a number the client accepted on the first pass, and Marcus started putting me in rooms I'd never been in before. I bought a gray overcoat, actual wool, $400, and I did not feel one flicker of guilt about it. Callie came home for the holidays and hugged me in the driveway and pulled back and said, "Dad, what is happening to you?" She laughed the whole way inside. She kept looking at me across the table like I was a magic trick she couldn't figure out. And Nadine watched all of it. She started coming home at 6. Book club evaporated in a single week, and nobody ever said a word about it. The gym bag came out of her trunk and went into the wash. She started asking me questions at dinner, real ones, follow-up ones, and I answered every one of them pleasantly and completely, and then went back to my plate. And that was the thing that unsettled her most, I think. Not coldness. Pleasantness. A wall you can't get angry at. The Saturday after Christmas, she made pot roast. She hadn't made pot roast in 4 years. She put on the green dress. She lit 2 candles on a Saturday for no reason at all, and when I came down the stairs, she was standing at the counter waiting to see my face. "You look nice," I said. And I meant it. I've never been able to lie about that woman. We ate. It was good. She talked about a trip to the coast in the spring, an inn she'd found, a balcony. And afterward, she came around the island and put both hands flat on my chest and tipped her chin up the way she used to when we were 27 and stupid and had nothing. And I took one step back. "Love has to be earned," I said. Right? That's what you told me. So earn it." I counted. 22 seconds. Longest number I ever got in my life. She didn't cry. She just took her hands back and stood there with them at her sides like she didn't know where to put them anymore, and I watched a thing go across her face that I recognized because I'd been wearing it in that same kitchen for 2 years. And, God help me, it didn't feel good. That's what nobody tells you. I'd have paid money for it to feel good. Before I go on, I want to hear from you. Was that fair? Or did I cross a line right there? Tell me honestly in the comments. I read every one of them. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday in January, the origination file came. 211 pages. I took it to the Bellwood, ordered a black coffee, and went through it front to back with a pen. Page 19. The disbursement instruction. The full draw hadn't gone to a contractor, or a school, or a hospital. $190,300 had gone out in one wire to MRC Holdings, LLC. The same MRC Holdings that had been quietly pulling $1,150 a month out of my checking account for 2 years while I assumed it was insurance. So I did the next boring, careful thing. I looked up the LLC's filing with the state. Public record. Costs nothing. Takes 4 minutes. MRC Holdings, LLC. Registered agent at that strip mall on Holloway Avenue. 2 members listed on the formation documents. The first name I expected, Nadine's. The second name was Roz, her sister. 19 years of Thanksgivings. The woman who sat in a hospital hallway with me for 9 hours the night Callie was born because Nadine's mother couldn't get a flight. Roz, who I lent $4,000 to in 2019 and never asked about again. And underneath the 2 member names on the line for the third organizer was a name I had never seen before in my life. A man's name, and next to it, the same Holloway Avenue address. Marcus. Not my Marcus. A different last name entirely. I sat in that booth and I finally understood what the 4 words on that card actually meant. Tell him or I will. Because whoever wrote that card wasn't threatening to tell me about an affair. He was threatening to tell me about the money. And a man who is threatening to expose a thing is a man who is standing to lose something himself. That was the first crack of daylight I'd had in 4 months. Because think about it. If you're the other man, if you're just some guy sleeping with somebody's wife, you don't write "tell him" or "I will" on a card and put it in her coat pocket. You stay quiet. Quiet is the whole point of what you're doing. You only push a woman to confess to her husband when you're the one bleeding. So I stopped looking at Nadine for a while, and I started looking at MRC Holdings. Here's the part where being underestimated pays for itself. For 19 years, that woman watched me sit at a kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of subcontractor quotes, and she saw a boring man doing boring work. She never once thought of it as a skill. It was just Curtis being Curtis. But a construction estimator spends his whole career doing exactly one thing, taking a pile of documents from people who are motivated to hide things and finding out what's really underneath. Every bid I've ever won, I won because I read the page somebody hoped I'd skip. So I read pages. The county recorder's office is a beige room with 3 chairs and a woman named Pearl who has worked there since before I was married. Everything filed against property in this county is sitting there in public view, and it costs $1 a page. MRC Holdings had bought a commercial building on Holloway Avenue 3 years earlier. $460,000. That storage place with the orange doors and the chain-link gate, the one I'd sat outside in my truck like a fool thinking I was looking for a motel. And there were 2 mortgages recorded against it. A first from a real bank, and a second, filed 18 months later, from a private lender out of Ohio at a rate I had to read twice. They'd bought a business. They'd overpaid for it. And when it started sinking, they'd gone to the kind of lender you go to when the real banks have already said no. Then, in the margin of the recorder's index, one more thing. A notice of default. Filed in September. 6 weeks before the 11th of October. That was the whole shape of it, sitting right there in a beige room for $4 in copy fees. The storage business was going under. The second lender was calling the loan. And somebody had put $190,000 at my house into the hole to keep the water out, and then bled our checking account $900 a month at first, $2,600 by August, trying to hold the line. And she never told me. Not once. Not when they signed. Not when it started failing. Not when she was standing at a bank counter on Holloway Avenue for the 11th time, pulling cash out of the account where our daughter's tuition lived. I sat in my truck outside that county building for a long time with my hands on the wheel, and what got me wasn't the money. I want to be clear about that. It was that she thought I couldn't handle it. 19 years, and her read on me was that I was a man you had to work around. Real quick, if you're still here with me, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know. All right. Now, the third name. The organizer. Marcus, different last name than my boss, no relation. And I'm going to leave his last name out of this because he's a real person somewhere and I'm not in the business of ruining people anymore. He wasn't hard to find. He'd been listed as the managing member on the storage company's own state filings for 3 years. There were photos on a business listing page. A man about my age. Sunglasses on his head at 11 in the morning. And there was a review on that listing from 8 months earlier from a woman complaining that the office was never staffed. The owner had replied. And in the reply, in public, for anyone in the world to read, he'd written that the business had been operating short-handed since our partner's family situation changed. Hooray, villain. That's the thing I keep coming back to. He wasn't a monster. He was a guy who'd sunk everything into 4 rows of orange doors and watched a bigger outfit open a climate-controlled place 2 miles closer to the highway, and he'd started drowning. And the woman drowning next to him was somebody else's wife. Tell him or I will wasn't a lover's threat. It was a business partner at the end of his rope, telling her to go get the rest of the money from the man who actually had it. Because in his mind, I was the last dry ground left. And here's the piece I hadn't put together yet. If Roz was a member and Roz co-signed anything, then this wasn't only my marriage. This was going to reach every chair at every Thanksgiving table I'd sat at for 2 decades. I kept building the folder. Origination file. Recorder printouts. LLC filings. 14 months of statements with the 11 withdrawals circled. A copy of the default notice. And I sat on all of it. For 5 weeks. Because I wanted to see if she'd tell me. That's the honest truth. I gave her 5 weeks of open door and I never once mentioned a single thing I knew. She used those 5 weeks to try to fix us instead. She cooked. She started walking with me on Sunday mornings, and she is a woman who has never voluntarily walked anywhere. She bought a new dress and asked what I thought of it in a voice that had actual nerves in it. She left her phone face up on the counter, unlocked, for a whole week, which is its own kind of confession if you think about it. And every day she didn't tell me, something in me went a little further out of reach. She was fighting to save the marriage by making herself lovable again. She never understood that the only thing that would have saved it was one sentence at that kitchen island. Then, on a Wednesday in late February, she went to Roz's for the evening and left her tablet on the arm of the couch. I wasn't snooping. I picked it up to move it because I was vacuuming, of all the stupid domestic things, and my thumb hit the screen and the messages were open. Not to Marcus. To Roz. 3 months of it. Her sister asking when she was going to just talk to Curtis, Nadine saying she couldn't, that he'd never look at her the same way. Roz saying he was a good man and he'd understand. And then, from September, right after that default notice, I can't ask him now. Have you seen him lately? He's finally happy. If I tell him what I did, he'll walk out that door and he won't even slam it. She was right. That's the part that sat on my chest. She had me pegged exactly right, and she'd known me well enough to see it coming, and she still chose the lie for another 5 months. And then, further down, one message from Marcus that she forwarded to Roz without comment, sent October 11th at 10:52 p.m., 48 minutes before she walked through my front door smelling like sandalwood and cut cedar. I put it in your coat. I'm done waiting, Nadine. Either he knows by Friday or the lender's letter goes to the house. And underneath that message, one line from Roz that I read maybe 15 times before I could make it hold still. Nadine, he already knows. He's known since November. He's known since November. 4 months. My sister-in-law had believed for 4 months that I was walking around that house holding all of it. Which meant she'd done something in November to put it in front of me. And I knew exactly what, because it had been sitting in my hand at the Bellwood back in January and I'd read right past it. I went and got the origination file off the shelf in my office. 211 pages. I went to the servicing log in the back, the part nobody reads, where every phone call and letter and change gets stamped with a date and a name. November 8. Change of mailing address. Statements had been going to a P.O. box on Holloway Avenue since the day the loan funded. On November 8, somebody called the servicer, gave the last 4 of the account, and repointed every future statement to the house on Alderno Road. That's why the 3rd notice came to my mailbox in December. It didn't slip through. Somebody aimed it at me. So, on the last Thursday in February, I drove to the Bellwood at 4 in the afternoon, took the corner booth, ordered a black coffee, and texted Roz 2 words. We should talk? She was there in 25 minutes. 19 years I've known that woman, and I had never once seen her walk into a room and not say hello first. She sat down across from me and put her purse on the seat and said, okay. I slid the folder across the table. Origination file on top, county printouts under it, statements at the bottom with the 11 withdrawals circled in blue. She didn't open it. She just put her hand flat on the cover, the way you'd hold down a napkin in the wind. You changed the mailing address, I said. Yes? Why? She looked at the window for a while. Then she said, because I couldn't sleep, and she could. And then Roz told me the whole thing, and I want to say something before I lay it out, because it matters. I did not enjoy it. I sat in that booth listening to a woman I'd known since she was 24 come apart in a diner, and there was no part of me that felt like a winner. Their father died 6 years ago. He left Roz a duplex out on the east side, and he left Nadine nothing but a savings bond and a note that said he knew she'd be fine. That's a whole other story, and it's not mine to tell, but it explains a lot about a woman I was married to for 19 years. 3 years ago, Roz met Marcus through a church group. He had a plan and a spreadsheet and 4 rows of orange doors on Holloway Avenue that were throwing off decent money. $460,000. Roz put the duplex up as collateral on the note. Her father's house, the only thing she'd ever been given. 11 months later, a climate-controlled place opened 2 miles closer to the highway. Newer, cheaper, with a gate that actually worked. Their occupancy went from 84% to 31% in a year and a half. Roz couldn't cover it. And she couldn't tell anybody, because the one thing her father had ever handed her was sitting inside it. So she went to her sister. And Nadine, who had spent 6 years being the daughter who got the savings bond, said yes. That's the motive. That's the whole ugly, human, understandable thing. She didn't do it for a man. She did it to finally be the one who could. She was going to tell you, Roz said. Every month she was going to tell you. And every month it got bigger, and then it got too big, and then she just stopped being able to. Let me pause here for 1 second. If you're still riding along with me, hit subscribe and drop a like. It's free and it keeps stories like this one going. All right. I asked about the cash. The 11 withdrawals, the $23,700, the branch 16 miles east. Payments. Every 15th and every last day of the month. She'd drive out there because she didn't want an ATM slip with a familiar address printing out in a machine 3 blocks from my office. I asked about the $11.50 a month that I'd been calling insurance in my own head for 2 years. Roz just nodded. That one started before the loan. That was Nadine covering the operating shortfall out of our checking account with a standing transfer, and me signing off on it every month by never asking. Then I asked the one that had been sitting on my chest since October. Is she sleeping with him? Roz looked me in the eye and said no. She said it fast, and she said it flat, and I have known that woman long enough to know what her lying face looks like. That wasn't it. The cologne, I said. He was in the car with her, she said. They'd been at the lender's office in Coldbrook for 3 hours. She sat in his car because it was raining, and she didn't want to say any of it out loud on the phone in front of a window. And that's the part where you'd think I'd feel relief. I didn't. Honestly? For a second, I was almost disappointed, and I'd had to sit with what that says about me. Because an affair, at least, is a thing that happens to a marriage. This was a decision she made about me. She looked at 19 years and decided I was the one person in her life she could not tell the truth to. Now, here's a question I want your honest opinion on, because it's still the one I turn over. Which is the worst betrayal, the money, or the fact that she never trusted me enough to ask? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know how you see it. Then I took the card out of my shirt pocket and put it on the table between the ketchup and the napkin holder. It had been in my wallet, then a drawer, then my coat, since the 11th of October. Corners gone soft. 4 words and a date. Marcus put this in her coat, I said. He told her, tell him, or I will. What's March 14th? And Roz went the color of the tabletop. She picked it up. She turned it over. She unfolded it flat, the way I never had, because I'd read the 4 words on the outside crease the second I found it and never thought to open the thing all the way. There was more writing on the inside. 2 lines I'd been carrying around in my pocket for 4 months without ever seeing. Roz put her hand over her mouth. Curtis, she said. Marcus didn't write this. I counted the silence. I got to 14, and I'll tell you, silence is data if you know how to read it, and everything that came out of those 14 seconds told me the floor was about to move again. Then who did? You don't understand, she said. Nadine never signed your name on that loan. How? Roz. Somebody signed my name. I know, she said. I was there when they did it. I put my hands flat on that table because I wanted them somewhere I could see them. Say it plain, I said. August 9th, Roz said. The closing was at Marcus's office at 4 in the afternoon. Nadine wasn't there. What do you mean she wasn't there? She backed out that morning. She called me from the driveway crying and said she couldn't do it, that it was your house, that you'd worked 11 years on it. Roz's voice went down to nothing. And I told her fine. I told her I'd handle it. You signed it. I signed both of them, she said. Her name and yours. I've had her signature memorized since we were kids. Yours was on the Christmas cards. And there it was. Sitting in a diner booth on Route 7 at 5 in the afternoon, 4 months of numbers rearranging themselves one last time. Then what's the 23,000? I said. Because that came out of my account, 11 times, from a branch 16 miles east, and my wife's the only other person on that account. She found out in October. Roz was crying by then, quietly, the way people cry when they've been holding it a long time. Marcus called her about a payment and she didn't know what he meant. That's how she found out the loan existed. That's what the 3 hours at the lender's office in Coldbrook were. She was trying to find out if she could unwind it without it landing on you. And the withdrawals? She started making the payments herself so the account wouldn't go delinquent. So it wouldn't hit your credit before she figured out how to tell you. Roz looked up at me. She wasn't covering a theft, Curtis. She was covering mine. I sat there and I did the only thing I know how to do under pressure, which is arithmetic. 11 withdrawals. First one dated November 3rd. The loan funded August 9th. Almost 3 months where somebody else was making those payments, and it wasn't her. Every number I'd found had been true. Every single one. And I'd built the wrong building out of them because I'd started with a cologne and worked backward. Then Roz turned that card around and slid it across the table to me. Open. It was Nadine's handwriting. I've known that handwriting since I was 26 years old. Tell him or I will wasn't a threat somebody made to her. It was a line she wrote to herself. And underneath it, in the crease I'd never opened, March 14, our anniversary. No more excuses. Tell Curtis everything. He deserves better than a coward. She'd written herself a deadline. She'd been carrying it in her coat pocket since March, giving herself a date, missing it, and folding it back up again. And on the 11th of October, I'd pulled it out of that coat, read the outside crease, and decided what it meant. I want to be very honest with you here, because this is the part I've had to live with. I had 4 months of documents and not one conversation. I had $190,000 of evidence, and I never once said the words, "What's going on?" to the woman I married. I sat in that kitchen and let her cook pot roast and put on the green dress, and I stepped back and told her to earn it, while I was building a case out of a smell in a hallway. Every single thing I found was real, and the story I told myself about it was wrong. But here's the thing, and this took me a long time to get to. Both things were true at the same time. She didn't cheat on me, and she also let me sit in the dark for 5 months, watching me get thinner and quieter and further away, choosing every single day not to say one sentence. She let me think what I thought because telling me the truth was harder than being misunderstood. So, no, the story I built wasn't the real one. But the marriage that made it possible? That was real as the table I was sitting at. I drove home. She was on the porch, in the cold, with no coat on, and Roz's car was already in the driveway. We talked until almost 2 in the morning. Not a fight. There was nothing left to fight about. Everything was already on the table in a manila folder. She said one thing I'll never forget. She said, "I kept waiting to be the kind of person who could tell you. And every day I wasn't. I loved you a little more and could say a little less." Here's what actually happened after, because I know that's what you want. I did not go to the police about Roz, and people have told me I was a fool for it. Maybe. But her father's duplex was collateral on a note she signed at a kitchen table trying to keep a promise to a dead man, and putting her in a courtroom wasn't going to put $1 back in my house. What I did instead was write a letter to the lender, with the origination file attached, page 19 flagged, disputing the signature. Fraudulent execution. I didn't threaten anybody. I just laid out the documents in order, the way I'd lay out a bid. The lender's own file did the rest. Because on page 141, and I had walked past it twice, the notary's log showed 2 signers present at 4:00 p.m. on August 9th. Nadine's driver's license number was recorded. And that license number was on the car rental agreement in Coldbrook that afternoon, 90 minutes away, because she'd driven out there to sit in a parking lot and cry about a thing she'd decided not to do. She hadn't been in that room. The notary had logged a person who wasn't there. The whole instrument came apart on its own paperwork. It took 11 months and a lawyer who charged me $9,000. The lien came off the house in January of the following year. The storage business went to auction. Marcus lost the orange doors, and Roz lost the duplex, and neither of those things happened because I did anything to them. They happened because of a note two people signed at a kitchen table 3 years earlier. What goes around comes around. I just didn't have to be the one carrying it. Nadine and I are not together. I want to be straight about that because I know some of you were hoping. We tried for about 7 months. And what I found was that I could forgive her completely. I do, and still not be able to unlearn what those 5 months taught me. Some things you can put back on the shelf. Some things just don't fit up there anymore. We had dinner 3 weeks ago at Rowan's. Corner booth. Deb still works the front. Nadine got the scallops, and I got the ribeye, medium, and I spent 10 minutes watching her make up her mind, same as always. She's doing all right. She's got her own place over by the park, and she's the one who calls Callie on Sunday nights now. I still have the shoebox. 19 years of receipts going soft at the folds. Callie found it last summer and asked why on earth I'd kept them, and I told her the truth, that for a long time I thought love was a thing you had to keep the paperwork on. That if I could just show enough proof of effort, someone would sign off on me. Turns out nobody signs off on you. You do that yourself, at 10 to 6 in the morning, hanging off a bar you can't pull yourself up on yet. I'm 48 now. I run a department. I take my coffee black, I still count the silences, and I still fix that porch step every fall even though the house is only half mine on paper and fully mine in every way that's ever mattered. She was right about one thing, in the end. Love does have to be earned. She just never told me the part that took me 2 years and $190,000 to figure out, that the first person you have to earn it from is yourself. If this story stayed with you, and you'd like to hear more true-to-life stories of secrets, family, and hard-won peace, tap the video on your screen now. I'll be waiting for you there.